start, and for those that are not familiar with pop music in Australia, the title of our presentation comes from Crowded House. Everywhere you go, always take the weather with you, and if you don't know the song, make sure you go on Spotify and be aware of that. And this is exactly a grant application. Poppy was asking me, are you presenting about aviation? I say, no, it's about weather and tourism. So a new topic for me, and for this team, we're trying to build track record. I appreciate Sarah's support and the gift support for us to be able to embark on that journey, because we don't do those things easily. Now, when we think about our trip, usually outdoors locations, we tend to create a destination image associated with weather. I don't think you would usually look at those locations and see that image in your head. You don't want to go to a ski resort with very few snow. You don't want to expect you're going to be in Tahiti without sunny. Now, what is happening is that overall there's a decline in favorable weather in Australia, and we are so heavily dependent on outdoor destinations. This is something very, very significant. We're seeing changes in rainfall variation, in frequency of extreme heat events, and so forth. So the changing weather will have implications for our industry. Now, what is missing at the moment is actually an integrative supply-demand approach, because a lot of the studies on weather and tourism either focus on the supply or either they focus on the demand. And what we're trying to do basically here is to bring both together. All right, so first of all that I would ask you is that what is the value if you go to Tahiti and you could be compensated or not by having a good weather in that? And it does make a significant difference. And when we start to think that our weather decisions are based on a lot of things, where we go, when do we go, what sort of things we do in that location, what sort of accommodations we have. So there is a significant amount of emotional and value, financial value on that. So we want to increase the ability of Australia to adapt to weather variability. We want to make sure we create guidelines for the industry. We want to measure the time and the financial value of weather, and we also want to make sure that we understand the link between weather and the quality of that experience. So the research purpose is actually to create tools, and I'll come to the outcomes towards the end, to remediate weather changes when, for example, you expect to have an experience outdoors and it's suddenly raining, and you might want to put, for example, a planetarium in there. We also want to make sure that we're working to co-design the remediation process. So these are our 5 research questions that are around, measuring the resources and the variability in weather and tourism. What are those conditions and that are related to the choices that the tourists make? What is the quality of that experience, the monetary and time importance as well? And that's basically what we try to innovate. There is no such project for a country like Australia. We have similar projects not focusing the integration of supply and demand, for example, for the United States, particularly focusing on the camping activity. We also want to make sure that we look at the experiences that I've mentioned to you and the time and the value of those experiences. So what we want to basically to create to destinations is that understanding. One question, for example, the big 4 camping. Are they aware that travel pattern booking for people depending on the weather, on the origin where they live, and also in terms of the destinations where these parks are located? To understand that process, we create this conceptual framework that basically has 5 parts. The influence of weather in the destination choice, order determinants, the travel decision, the value that exists between the favorable and unfavorable conditions, and basically how we can adapt either the destination, but also to create weather insurance, which I mentioned a little bit earlier. So to unpack a little bit some of those parts, we want to understand the influence of weather variability in terms of the destination image. What happens when that image is not connected? What sort of expectations exist in terms of determinants to make this trip? And how do we create value or not? How do we lose value when weather conditions are simply not there? The other very, very important aspect that actually has an influence in the competitiveness of a destination is the reliability of weather. Are there destinations that are simply better prepared to offer more stable weather? What risks are behind that, and what alternatives we need to implement with destinations to cope with that variability? And we're also going to be focused on the risk mitigation approach, either to co-design destination adaptability, or also to look at new services like weather insurance, and we saw how important weather insurance in general has been since the pandemic. This is the methodological framework. We have a literature review that is going to inform the interviews in the focus group stakeholders. We're going to be doing experiments and surveys, and all of that combined will help us also to inform and co-design that implementation for destinations. We are working with 4 types of destinations in Australia. Secondary data, we need to understand the various weather attributes and understand which of those attributes are more important to certain typologies of destinations. We will then create weather-based scenarios that are really relevant to those destinations that our visitors are considering traveling, and using interviews and surveys to do that. Also, secondary data, we need to look at the tourists, and a great way to do that is through big data and social media. There's a lot of opportunities for us to correlate because we know the dates and the location, we can know the weather, and we can check their experience to understand through econometric models what is the link between weather and satisfaction on that front. And in terms of primary data collection, we want to use experiments with tourists based with our partners in other countries to understand the differences between their perception of weather in Australia. We want to understand the monetary value. As I said, for example, is people prepared to pay a premium? Is it 10, 20, 30% to come to a situation where the weather is more favorable? We want to do insight surveys and interviews, and we're already planning to do the Great Barrier Reef thanks to support of GIFT. And the third phase is interviews in focus groups, so we can develop the electronic toolkit that will inform that guideline of adaptability. These are the communication results. That's my final slide. Apart from the academic outputs, the electronic toolkit, we want to have an executive summary for leading stakeholders. We want to make sure that we produce case studies. We want to deliver keynote address, and we want to also make sure we have a piece in the conversation. So that has been basically my life for January and February. I don't have a problem saying that this nearly broke me twice over summer, but it's when you have a good team and you're very committed and resilient, and you have a good support, as we have here at GIFT. We managed to submit on the 8th of March, so it is in. And I know that Kevin also has a discovery in there, so fingers crossed, Kevin, that we can be successful. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you.